So this is the class outline. First of all, welcome, both of you. I appreciate your being here. We will begin with a guided manifestation, followed by an overview of the mythos of Demeter, her archetypal voice, ways to invoke Demeter, journaling prompts, and an open forum at the end of class. So, in creating the energy for a sacred space, I have a lovely manifestation for you. Feel free to get as comfortable as you need to be. And just take a few deep cleansing breaths. Close your eyes if you feel like you need to. Go inward, get centered, and root your feet to the floor. Really put your feet down and relax your shoulders. Get as comfortable as you feel you can. A few more deep breaths. I call on you, great motherly goddess of the harvest. Come forward within us as we join together to celebrate your bounty with gratitude. Show us the deep-rooted power of your ability to bring forth nurturing nourishment from the earth. Allow us to commune with our inner mother voice as you show us the unconditional love and protective nurturing which you give to your own daughter. Teach us to have courage, to search ceaselessly for answers which seem to be deliberately hidden from us. We are powerful. We call forward the great nature goddess Demeter to be with us in this sacred space, this circle of women seeking wisdom and self-empowerment. Take a few more deep breaths, and when you are ready, you may open your eyes and enter the space of Demeter. Welcome. Welcome to this space in this sacred circle where we learn all about the archetypal voice and significance of the great goddess Demeter. I would like to begin by discussing a bit about Demeter's mythos. There are a lot of powerful deities in Greek mythology, and Demeter is one of the most. Her significance is powerful because of the connection she had with immortals. Therefore, her celebration, worship, and mystical cult practices were very important and played throughout the ancient Greek culture on a very large scale. Demeter is one of the originals born of the Titan union of Kronos and Rhea. She's the sister goddess of the original ancient Olympian gods. Of course, famed king of the gods being Zeus, who was briefly her consort. From that union was created her daughter, Persephone. Now, Demeter is a very powerful nature goddess. She's connected to the earth, whereas if you were with the Gaia class or watched the Gaia replay, you will see that Gaia herself is the earth, but Demeter is one connected with the power of the earth and tends to that earth energy. Okay, so she is very powerful as a goddess of the harvest, a grain goddess. She's associated with poppies, with serpents, with deep knowledge of the power of the earth itself and how to plant the seeds, harvest them, sow them, and bring them to bounty with harvest. So she was very important to the ancient cultures as they associated all of those ancient rituals with the goddess herself, and not only with her, but with her powerful daughter Persephone, the grain goddess. They worked together, and they worked in harmony together as mother and maiden. And that was how they were seen while they were together doing their work for the rituals of cultivation and harvest. But it is an interesting story because it isn't just that. There's the complexity of what happens when Demeter, who eventually does, have her daughter taken from her. Now, in the ancient myths and ancient religions, it was said that Zeus agreed to let his shadowy brother, Hades, marry his daughter, Persephone. And Hades was not much involved with the upper realms. In the drawing of the lots of the different segments of the main kingdoms, there was the skies or heavens, the sea and land, and then the underworld. When they drew lots to decide the three kings, Zeus became the king of the gods and the upper world as king of the heavens. Poseidon drew the lot of the oceans, and Hades drew the lot of the underworld. And he was very bitter about that. So he was not particularly popular among the Olympian gods above ground, nor did they completely spend time amicably with him for the most part, because he kind of kept to himself and was shadowy and emotional, but very powerful. The wealth and riches of the earth come from the underworld. So Zeus didn't consult Demeter, knowing that Demeter would disagree to this union, more likely, and wouldn't want to be separated from her daughter. But he allowed Hades nonetheless, knowing that if he didn't, there would be some animosity between them, which would cause a lot of friction. We will get more into that story in the next class about Persephone. But right now, it's about the mama energy. And Demeter was furious when she couldn't find Persephone, and nobody could tell her where her daughter was. And if you happen to be a mother or have witnessed mothering, you know what that feels like and can conceptualize the power the mother has for wanting to protect and be there and nurture and nourish their child. Now, Persephone wasn't a child. At that point, she was a young woman, a maiden, but they were so connected. They were like the quintessential, power mother-daughter energy. So they worked together. They harmonized together. They were very powerful in their work. But when Demeter realized that she couldn't find Persephone, that's when everything started to change. So Demeter is associated with bounty, lush life, harvest, good nourishment, motherly energy, while at the same time, she can also be the goddess of grief, loss, and determination. So when we're looking at her story, a lot of that myth, apart from Persephone, when she's alone and grieving and searching ceaselessly for her daughter, she no longer focuses on cultivating. The world of the mortals starts to suffer because of that. So there is a lot of difficulty around that, a lot of strife. And when the mortals are unhealthy and unhappy, the rest of the Olympians start to fear and suffer from it, because they are revitalized by the temple fires being lit, the sacrifices, the offerings, the vitality of human life helps keep them vital unto themselves. Even though they are immortal, they thrive on it. So at this particular point, Demeter is unable and unwilling to do so. And she goes into a period of withdrawal. She draws inward in grief and transforms herself into the visage of a crone and wanders looking constantly for her daughter. She is welcomed in Ulysses by the king and queen there, the royalty. And then she is offered the position of nursemaid as they take her in and have pity on this wanderer, not realizing who she is. She begins to tend the young princess, and in doing so, creates a whole other set of stories and legends in place, which begin the basis of another ancient ritualistic religious practice, the Eleusinian mysteries. But this came forth first when Demeter decided, as a gift to thank the royal family for their kindness, she would take the baby Demophoon and would turn him into an immortal by covering him and anointing him in the food of the gods, ambrosia, and then burning away his mortality in a fire. Needless to say, at that particular moment, the mother walked in hysterical at seeing her son being held over a fire, which would be terrifying, and she withdrew, pulled the baby back, but in that moment also revealed her identity. And so as the history progresses through the myths, she then decides to give Triptolemus the information, the sacred knowledge of cultivation. Because at this point, of course, the world is suffering and things are difficult. But she really comes back to that more later on in the myth. So at this point, she withdraws, she starts to leave and continue her journey. And there's a famine. Animals aren't thriving. Humans are diminishing and starving. And the gods are getting really anxious. So the sun, the actual personification of the sun, Helios, eventually decides to commune with Demeter, having witnessed exactly what had happened, and has sympathy for her and tells her what really happened, having watched this act, watching, Persephone being taken into the underworld by Hades on his dark chariot and everything. And so he tells Demeter, and Demeter flies into a rage. It's the kind of motherly rage that, again, as a mother, you would understand, realizing what had happened to your child. And she is so strong and so powerful that she is able to completely evaporate Zeus's reigns and his attempt to keep replenishing the earth and help people along with his reign. She refuses to let it fall. At this point, Zeus gets the message, and he agrees to allow Persephone to be returned to her. The details of that part of the myth will be discussed in the next class about Persephone, since they're kind of entwined. So once they are reunited, the famine time immediately comes to an end, and there is a robust new life resurfacing, vegetation coming back again, a sudden change in seasons. So when we're looking at that Eleusinian mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries, it's interesting to note that it isn't only about the agrarian concepts, it's also about the creation and the sacred process of recognizing the changing of the seasons. So Demeter's myth, her mythos with Persephone, and that will be discussed further next class, is completely tied in with the power of the changing of the seasons. And this is how the ancient Greeks recognized them. So it was springtime and lush and wonderful with the return of Persephone. Then there was the time of growing bounty, beauty of summer, the dwindling of the light, and the starting of change has to do with the harvest time. And then winter is when Demeter draws back in again every year, grieving again the loss of her daughter, who every year returns to Hades, where she is queen of the underworld. So it's a very powerful myth. And it's interesting too that so many sacred rites were associated with these goddesses, not just with Demeter, but with Persephone as well. So we had the Illusion Mysteries, which was about the cycles of the seasons and the agrarian concepts, and they were secrets that were given to Triptolemus and shared in that sense. The first agrarian culture in truth, the ones that learned not just to randomly collect what was there, like gatherers, but to begin harvesting, tilling, doing all of they needed to create a true agrarian culture. So in that concept, mythologically speaking, is a very powerful time for immortals. But the Thesmophoria is another ritualistic religious practice from the ancient times associated with Persephone and Demeter. And it was a Greek religious festival in the ancient times, and it was held in honor of both goddesses annually around the time when seeds were sown in late autumn, when they were beginning to put things in for the next season. And in some areas is associated with a harvest. It depends on which part of Greece. In each part of kingdom in Greece, there were different representations and ways of worshiping the gods, as you could imagine. The festival was one of the most widely celebrated in ancient Greece, and it was specifically it was very secretive, but it was specifically for adult women. So these rituals and practices were only practiced by adult women. So women who had reached a certain level of maturity and could understand fertilities issues and work with the harvesting and how it felt to plant, how it felt to grow. I can feel that. I can understand why it was adult women at that time, not young women who didn't understand that yet, but a little bit more of a sense and feeling of maturity. So there was a lot of power associated with both goddesses, but Demeter being the mother power. So that's a very powerful archetype. So now that you know a bit more about the mythos and ancient practices surrounding the goddess, I'm going to go ahead and talk about her archetypal significance. Pardon me. So there are some really powerful things to consider to look at. We have the goddess archetypes within us, including those of the gods. In the future, I'll be getting into those classes as well. But understanding that we have all of the archetypes within us and the ability to choose how we work with them is more along the lines of the work of self-empowerment, what I like to call emotional alchemy. Rather than allowing the emotions to control us and rule us in the moment, being able to take a step back and recognize the significance or the power of the archetype that is coming forward, be it the positive part of it or the shadow side of it, allows you to be able to make the choice. So when approaching Demeter, it's really wonderful and powerful to think about accessing your own inner mother voice. What does that feel like to you? These are things to think about. You can take notes or come back to me later if you would like to discuss that in the women's circle. But what does it feel like to you to think about communing with the inner mother? And what is your relationship to the influence your mother had on you? Because when we think about the inner mother, it isn't just us as the motherly voice and being a mother or a parent in our own right. We are highly influenced by the connection we have with our mothers. So it's important to look at that. What triggers are there for you? And hopefully they are positive. If they are along the lines of more of a dysfunctional or difficult stressor factor for you emotionally, it's interesting to look at using Demeter's voice and archetype to be able to make choices. So are you going to use that feeling, the nurturing you received from your own mother, to influence your voice as a mother? Or are you going to heal that inner mother by the act of grieving, relentlessly searching for the answers you need to overcome the issues in your life regarding this, and then to celebrate your own power as a mother making choices for yourself. Now, I don't necessarily mean as a mother along the lines of whether or not you actually have a child, but to be the mother archetype, nurturing, supportive, creative, the ability to provide bounty and to be able to sustain it. That's what we think of with that vocal archetype. And the inner chatter that we constantly have, if you are able to pinpoint that for yourself and say, in this very moment, I need to mother this situation. I need to mother myself, or I need to bring motherly energy out from the core of my being so that I can tend to these stressful situations or any situation at hand to create the manifestation of bounty, success, the wonderful richness of nurturing, support, and all that is earthly and good into my life. So that archetypal voice is highly powerful and very potent. And it allows for a sense of belonging, a sense of unconditional nurturing, and that no matter where you are, what you're going through, you can go to that place within yourself to feel loved, appreciated, supported, and uplifted. Because in a healthy mother environment, that is the energy that you would hope to manifest and bring out. Okay. For those of us as mothers who have mothered or want to mother, that is a very potent energy. And it's powerful to want to protect and care for one's child, be it a literal child or whatever it is you're creating and bringing forth professionally as your creative baby, so to speak. It's what you are nurturing. So those are archetypal concepts and ideas to look at. And we often look at the inner child, which is actually next class. Persephone is the personification of the inner child. But it's really important to know how to nurture the inner child. So that's why Demeter is so powerful. Learning how to be able to use that nurturing motherly voice will bring those two together for yourself archetypally, and we'll be working with the inner child in the Persephone class. So now that we have a bit of an overview of what it feels like to use the Demeter voice, I'm going to pop into share screen mode once more and show you some ways to invoke Demeter. Really powerful, fun ways too, but interesting concepts to work with to help you bring that archetype into a little bit more focus. So, ways to invoke Demeter. And as you see, I have a beautiful photograph of all the bounty that you might consider with her and her power. So when we look at ways to invoke Demeter, we think about manifesting the goddess of the harvest because she is associated most with that. So gardening and grounding work, being in nature, communing with your inner mother goddess, being an advocate for yourself and others, walking the path towards self-discovery, even if it causes you grief. And then items of power to consider using or having around you, decorating, wearing, symbols to use, essential oils and such are laid out as so. Feel free to take a screenshot of this, and I will be sending out the video transcript later. So plants, fruit, vegetables, grains, wheat, barley, bread, poppies, and poppy seeds. Those are all things to use and work with on the food spectrum of things that would bring Demeter more into focus. For decorative items and things to use and wear would be serpents in art and jewelry, a blue shawl, which she would frequently be associated with shrouding herself in, the cornucopia, a torch, a flaming torch, which she wandered with, symbols of motherhood, So that could be literally symbols of motherhood, being a mom, nurturing. There are a lot of those available. Garnet, onyx, and jasper are good semi-precious stones and crystals to work with. And then for essential oils, you would consider ginger, vanilla, and cardamom. Apologize for my voice here. This is bringing some stuff up for me too. So those are ways of looking at bringing that energy into your life and working with it. And they're powerful aspects or things you may start finding now that you're looking at the Demeter archetype. You may start noticing that you are finding those symbols around you, and that I want you to pay attention to patterns. Like if you start seeing things that of what I've mentioned out and about, or if you find a beautiful blue shawl, splurge on yourself. Buy something wonderful that you feel connects you to that nurturing mother. Or conversely, if you make something, create something that brings that up for you. Planting, it can be a container garden. It doesn't have to be in the earth. It can be planting herbs or flowers. Wildflowers such as poppies are a great way to do that. Depending on what you feels right to you, to use to bring up that powerful energy for yourself. And of course, for those of you who do know, I make custom jewelry. So if you're looking for a jewelry piece to help bring that forward for yourself, I can help you with that as well. But it's really interesting energy. You have fake plants. Oh, well, you can also use imagery of plants, artwork, photographs, things that make you feel that way. And also, if you just have nature around you, typically things will be growing, we hope. Only I live in a desert, so what's growing around here, we have to work really hard to keep going. Right, Monica? Yeah, she knows what I'm talking about. So those are all really potent things to do. Now, I'm going to give you some exercises as well. So I'll share screen one more time and show you some journaling prompts that will help you a lot while you're thinking about this in the next few days. Feel free to join me in Mystical Women's Circle to share any ideas you may have about this, but allow me to go ahead and pop this back up again. There we go. So I decided to break this into 4 concepts for you to work with, having specifically to do with Demeter. And so while journaling, you can think of it as the process of growing. To sow first, you want to think about planting the ideas. So what seeds of inspiration do you need to plant in order to manifest your highest goals? Again, feel free to screenshot this for yourself if you need to. Take a picture, however you need to. So I'll repeat that. What seeds of inspiration do you need to plant in order to manifest your highest goals? Harvest. I just noticed a typo there. Oopsie. That's okay. Express gratitude for the nourishing abundance and culmination of projects which nurture your growth. So harvest is really powerful, right? But before we harvest, you want to make sure you are tending those seeds. So what steps do you need to take to make changes while tending to your dreams and goals? And then at the end of all of that energy would feel more like, how do you feel when you commune with your inner mother? How can you heal and honor this powerful aspect of your psyche? So it should really go sow, tend, harvest. Plant the seeds. What steps do you need to take? And then harvest with gratitude. And then you want to nurture all of that energy with the voice of the mother archetype. So those are all powerful things, and you may start finding you've come up with a lot of interesting ideas and concepts while you're working with prompts like this, and may come up with some of your own while you're exploring these particular ones. So I'd be curious to know what you come up with, and you can share that with me later, of course, or if you want to drop something in the chat. At this point now, Katie, I don't know if your microphone is working, but I hope so. So we can go ahead and do some discussions about this for our open forum. It is now time. You are both welcome to unmute. And let's see what we can brainstorm about and bring forward for each other. So feel free to ask any questions. Katie, if you need to type them, that's fine. I can check the chat.
So one of the things that just popped into my head was when you have the blue shawl, and it just reminds me of just the Virgin Mary always being shown with a blue shawl, and this religious syncretism that happened, you know, as you start to see Christianity come into cultures where there is polytheism. So that was just
absolutely, absolutely
the idea of the mother and you know, the
that's absolutely accurate too. It's very, very accurate. And when I read that, and it's not commonly depicted that way, but what I did read at one point in my studies about her, that she was often depicted wearing a blue shawl or shroud, I was like, wow, that's amazing, because that's very Mary-like. And of course, ancient Christianity drew on the concepts of paganism and the old religions in order to make it appealing to the cultures there. Like, interesting anecdotal story. The reason why the Virgin is so popular in Mexico. When they were attempting to convert Mexico, they refused to make a dark-skinned baby Jesus. So when they were looking more at the Virgin that they had been created for them, they're like, yeah, but there's no way that could be this child's mother. So that's why the Virgin Mary and then Guadalupe, after the words, again, blue shroud, became highly accepted in Mexico. So it's interesting to see. And that's not even that ancient history. That's just from the conquistadores going and bringing the church with them. So it's interesting to look at that, what symbolism was taken from those ancient cultures and put into the more Christian religions so that it would be more acceptable to the people. Very good. Okay, Katie, did you want to say something? Let me see. Yeah, exactly, Katie. No, he wasn't. And of course, that is how he's commonly portrayed in our more like, you know, European style approach, was being a very Anglo, but no, he wouldn't have been white. He would have been olive-skinned, dark-skinned, and had very dark hair and very dark eyes. So yeah, definitely. And he also probably wasn't born on Christmas Eve, or Christmas Day, rather. But no, he was more than likely born
in the spring, like.
Yeah, no, more than likely he was born in March.
I mean, you know, like, because they were looking at where the stars are in the sky, and it was, you know, so that, but that was just to connect it to Yule and, you know.
Again, connecting it to the ancient pagan religions and finding a space for it. So I have history with Protestantism, of course, but in my own life, but I definitely feel connected to all of those patterns that tie the ancient myths and ancient religions together from those original source myths. So that's why Demeter is such an interesting persona to look at, because you can find her in other ways in other cultures, not just in Greece. So yeah, that's very good. Now, anything you feel about the inner mother and the motherhood aspect of things for yourselves? Does something come up for you regarding that, thinking about using that voice? Either one? No, but you can type it. I'll respond to you. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. Well, I mean, I understand this idea of nurturing, and I love the connection to the seasons and this idea of kind of you know, life cycles, but also, you know, annual cycles where you're there's times when you know, connecting it to something creative where you're starting to think about starting a project, and then you're working along it, and then when it's complete, sometimes you're sometimes it's kind of sad. You're excited because it's, you've harvested it, but then you're like, oh, I miss I miss the creative part. I miss the process. And so you begin again, right? So it's like that, not just, I mean, obviously we live in an agricultural area here.
Right, of course. Yeah, where we live. Yeah.
Season.
Well,
But,
and given that it is a desert where we live, we get that cycle like 4 times a year. Like I know when my hay fever triggers because they've been harvesting more hay.
Yeah.
For example, but it is true, and that you can look at that from the perspective of mothering a project and doing that. And also, I think as a mother, for me, like I'm already. When I look back at memories, for example, in photographic form of our child, of our son, and I see when he was so little and sweet, and now he's coming out of that phase, there's a whole set of feelings that comes from that as we go through one cycle into the next through the growth of our child. And that's really powerful. And he's still just a little guy. So I have a lot more cycles to go while he comes into maturity. So that's powerful stuff. It's really powerful work. Now let me see what you said, my dear Katie. Okay, so what keeps coming up for Katie is I had to mother myself as a child. And I remember looking back, I mothered everyone. I mothered my little brother, my little cousin, and really even my friend, which I still do today sometimes, but I feel like I've always been connected to that mother energy. That's interesting, and that is powerful. And you feel, let's see, there's also a grieving, I feel like with my oldest, because he's getting ready or getting to the stage where he doesn't need me as much. Well, yes. And is becoming more independent. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a lot. So for whatever reasons you felt that you had to mother yourself and others, but it's also probably part of your innate nature. You absolutely have a strong Demeter archetype. So she's somebody definitely to look at and work with and study. Katie, I think that you're probably, from my guessing, Demeter is your most prominent archetype. And some people tend to have one that is most dominant. And that's really powerful work because karmically, it's the energy you need to work the most with and learn the most about. Because sometimes and we hope that motherly energy, or we hope that the archetypal energy that is most prominent is always positive. But sometimes it can hold us back and become a little more of a difficulty. We start having issues surrounding that energy, and it can turn to more of a dysfunction. Not saying that yours is, but sometimes if we're trying so hard to keep things out or to keep things in balance, or trying so hard all the time to nurture, we start to lose the sense of what the nurturing really is and stay balanced and centered in that. So that's also very interesting. And in the book I'm working on, I work with both the positives and the shadows that can come with those archetypal voices. So that's interesting. So I want you to work on that this week for sure. Yeah. No, and so this is something I want you to work with this week, Katie, because Katie is saying there were definitely times where she felt resentful, and she never felt mothered, and that she always had to be the mature one. Yeah, no, I get that, Katie. That's where the original, like your external mother archetype was not the strong influence for you. But what it did do was it brought up your inner mother for you to work with so young, so early. So that's going to be very interesting for you this week. And I encourage you to go with that. Really go with the grief and process it, the forgiveness, whatever you need to do. And I'm sure you have worked with this in your life. And look at all of the good that you have created using that mother energy, of course, so that when we come to, not this week, but the following, come to the next class with Persephone, you're ready to work with and heal and nurture the inner child. Because they go together, of course, completely. So that's powerful. It's interesting. I'm glad to have somebody here attending live who actually has a highly prominent Demeter. That's really fascinating. It's good. It's interesting for me to work with the archetypes and see from people I'm engaging with what they respond most to. So that will be really interesting. And I'm sure you do too, Monica. And anybody who works with encouraging others or supporting others in any kind of fashion can bring up that Demeter energy. It's about, you know, that the passing on of information as well. So you can look at her as a teacher as well as a mother, because she taught the ancient agrarian concepts. So that's also really powerful too. How do you bring that forward and pass your powerful information on to other people? I know, Katie, and that's why I'm so glad we've met as well. Katie also has a women's empowerment group on Facebook, and it's wonderful. So I'm happy to be there. Monica, you should find hers as well. Feel free to post that if you want to in the comments. That's fine. In fact, that reminds me to, while I'm here with you, to put my link as well for anybody. I don't know if they can see the comments in the replay, but I do want to do so quick. Put that link as well right in the comments. Oop, there it is. So for anybody who may be watching the replay, there is the link. I have also added the links for my general event link. There will be more classes coming, and they are an individual registration. So you can register for whichever classes you want to, and not necessarily as a bulk thing, but I encourage you to register for all of them, because even if you can't attend the live, you can always watch the replay through the video transcript that I send out. And there's also a link at the bottom of my page for events in my website, but I've also attached the link here, which is for donations and tips. I do give these classes for free. I'm happy to do so. It is also my business. So if you happen to feel value from this and in any expression you would like to contribute, there's a link there for donations or tips. And I do appreciate any support. So I think we have come full circle today with this motherly energy. And I wish you both a lot of abundance this coming week with inspiration, and really get into that tilling the soil of your psyche and your subconscious, so to speak, to find what's in there about the mother archetype. So I thank you so much. I'm glad you are both here with me. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you next time for the Persephone class. Bye-bye.